All right. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. So we're going to jump into this week's Torah portion, Parshat Vayera. Parshat Vayera is another one. It's quite a dramatic parsha in the sense that um, it picks up in almost, let's call it the next act of Abraham Avinu's very dramatic life. We in the beginning, the Torah portion of this Act 1, let's call it Parshat Lech Lecha, last week's Torah portion, Avram Avinu receives his first command from God, Lech Lecha. He begins the process of becoming Av Hamon Goyim, the father of the nations of the world. God gives him responsibility, in a sense, or official responsibility, to not just focus on himself and his own spirituality, which is indicated in his name Avram, which means the transcendent father. Av means father, Ram means elevated, transcendent. And that, to a certain degree, speaks to him, in the sense, a little bit doing what Noach did, which was to be a transcendent individual that was not susceptible to the corruption and the paganism of the world around him at that time, but rather to be a loyal and pure and committed follower of God in heaven. Or not just God of heaven and earth, the one true God. But then God says, Avram, I'm going to give you a greater responsibility. I'm going to give you a promotion, and the promotion is that is a promotion downward. How could a promotion be downward? Is because God said, Avram, your purpose is not only your own self-elevation, to climb to ever greater heights in terms of your devotion, your commitment, your purity, etc., your purity and your piety, but rather, I'm going to add the letter Hey, and you're not going to no longer be Avram, but you're going to be Avraham, Av Hamon Goyim Netaticha. I have made you father of the nations of the world, which means you can now not just escape into your own piety and holiness, but rather you very much need to be involved and engaged with the world around you, and take responsibility for it and elevate those that you can, and bring refinement and purity and guidance and direction and light to the nations of the world. Now, the thing is, Abraham was already doing this, although he was doing it voluntarily. To a certain degree, Avram, that was what we said was the difference between him and Noah. We said that when Avram discovered God at the age of 3, and he stood against the world in this, the truth was that he was not the only monotheist of the time. Abraham was joined in monotheistic belief by the most influential or potentially influential human being on the planet, which was Noah. Noah was still alive in Avram's day, and Noah was a patriarch of all living things. All humanity were the children of Noah, and yet Noah didn't see it as his responsibility to work with the world, rather to retain his own piety. And even though it was his own kin that were, in a sense, deviating, and this was not, he did not see this as his responsibility. Even his son Shem, who had opened an institution of monotheism, right, Yeshivat Shem VaEver. Shem and Shem's grandson Aver together created a yeshiva, but that was for all those that arrived on their own to seek out the guidance. Shem and Aver taught them, but not to go out and evangelize, not to engage in outreach. Avram was devoted to this almost from the get-go, which is what immediately put him in the crosshairs of his own father Terach, and then subsequently in the crosshairs of Nimrod. Right? So he could have just let.
Do we have indication that Abraham did this kind of outreach and reach to Lot? I know he tried to save him, but we're talking about something intense here.
Yes, and Lot was his, let's call it his first and most devoted convert. When he left Ur Kasdim, right? And it says, who do you leave with?
He left with Lot.
Sarai, his wife, and Lot ben Achiv, right? Lot, his nephew. He had a whole bunch of other family members. Why was he just leaving with Lot? Lot had bought into what Abraham was teaching. Lot was a devoted disciple of Abraham. Even after they separated and Lot moved to Sodom, Lot remained a devoted disciple of Abraham.
Yeah, there's that midrash about the salt, offering the
Yes,
salt
but
to
no,
the angels.
importantly, Lot, even though he knew was at the risk of his own life, brought in guests, right? These
That's
two,
what I'm talking
as we'll get in. Yes, as we'll get, the midrash only adds some context to it,
about.
but the story is there straight in the Torah that when these two showed up, Lot brought them in, and he knew what the reaction would be, and in fact did play out when the people of Sodom got word of the fact that he had brought in guests. The bottom line is that he did this because he was even years removed from direct association with Abraham. He was still carrying Abraham's message. It also says that he was baking matzos for those guests. And Lot, albeit not a perfect and a perfectly righteous monotheist, was a devout monotheist and committed to the message of Abraham.
Yet he still chose, of all of the lands, this wealthy Lot chose Sodom.
Yep. So there's a couple expressions. There's a couple of commentaries on this, but I don't want to get ahead of myself but put a pin in that thought. Okay.
Sure.
So what happens? The parsha opens up here, and then we go through the whole thing. The end of the parsha is either way. Now the thing is, so it wasn't that Avram had a change in disposition after God added the letter Hey, but God made it not just what he would be doing voluntarily, but to a certain degree had this become his entire purpose. So still now you were doing it because it was the right thing to do. You had an innate sense that this was the right thing to do. Now I'm going to make this your raison d'etre, God says.
I think that's the whole difference between Abraham and Noah. It's a sense of mission.
It's absolutely. And God says, but now it's going to be woven into your name. This is for you and for your kin. And that's going, and again, the point of where we're going to go with this. And then gives Abraham the Brit Milah, right? And Abraham does Brit Milah, and so the parsha ends with Abraham performing the Brit Milah on himself as he's 99 years old, performing the Brit Milah on Yishmael, the one son that he had at that point, who was 13 years old at the time. And this is still carried on by the kin of Ishmael to this very day. The Arabs have their Brit Milah at the age of 13.
No kidding.
It could be one of the reasons why they're so angry all the time. And then the whole entire household, right? And so the parsha ends literally on that point, kind of Avraham and Ishmael. The last 3 verses or 4 verses is Avram at the age of 99 has his Brit Milah. Ishmael at the age of 13 has his Brit Milah, and then Avram gathered on that very day that God gave the command. Him and Ishmael had the Brit Milah, and then the final verse is that not only them but every single member of the household. Any male member of the household, whether family or purchased, all had the Brit Milah. End of the Torah, end of the parsha. This parsha opens up Vayera elav Hashem be'elonei mamre, right? And God reveals Himself to Abraham in Elonei Mamre. That's where he has his tent laid out. Elonei Mamre means literally kind of the open savanna, as it were. The savannas of Mamre. which means open, just open land, open wilderness land. Avram could have very easily settled in any of the major cities. In fact, there are times where he did settle in cities, and he was immediately a recognizable and distinguished figure. In fact, most kings considered him, in a sense, the greatest royalty in existence at that time, the most influential person of that time. Which is why there was always a rivalry between Avram and Nimrod, to the point where on the day that Avram died, his grandson Esav couldn't handle it. Not grandson. Yeah, grandson Esav couldn't handle it that his father's nemesis was still, his grandfather's nemesis was still alive, and that's why Esav comes back from the field all exhausted, because Esav goes to kill, to assassinate Avraham's nemesis, so that this person doesn't live a day longer than Avraham does. And that's Nimrod. But either way, Avram is definitely a king among kings because of his stature. But Avram chooses not to be that. Avram chooses to live a nomadic life out in the middle, so that he is not associated with one particular nation or people, but rather open to influence all of humanity. And that's Avram's shtick, if we can call it that way. He sets up a tent on the way, right? And as wayfarers would travel, right, we all know the famous idea that Avram's tent was open on four sides, right? So that it's open. It's it's interesting because you start to get a deeper appreciation of these ideas that you've heard as a child, when you start to live life a little bit, and you can plug it into your circumstances. I remember there was a particular rest stop on the 95 that I very much enjoyed. The problem was it was only on one direction of the 95, so you were only able to avail yourself of this rest area on the way in, but not on the way out of New York. Avram, his tent is open on all sides, so whichever direction people are traveling, he's ready and available, right? And he can come in. And Avram would serve always a very amazing meal. Why? Because Avram married two aspects of his own character, which is in general what he wants to try to do. You want to play to your strengths. And Avram has one to teach Torah, to share with the world the truth, or teach monotheism. I was saying necessarily teach Torah, teach monotheism. And the other is that he is the paragon of kindness. And so he says, well, what is the best way? Right? The Crusaders tried to teach their religion on the tip of the sword, right? Abraham says, the best way I know to teach religion is through hospitality and kindness. And so he would serve, everybody would come through a beautiful meal. And the people would turn and say, we'd like to pay you, Abraham. They would say, no, please don't. Understand that I have a different philosophy than the rest of you. The rest of you believe that there's the grain god, and there's the sun god, and there's the rain god, and all these various gods. So what actually ends up tying together all the various disparate blessings? The rain god gave you the blessing of the rain, and the grain god gave you the blessing of the grain, and is at the end of the day, it's you. That's kind of the great advantage of paganism, is that you're the one who actually sits at the head of the totem pole, because you have all these gods to serve. Who chooses which god I'm going to serve? I do. So really, at the head of the totem pole is myself. But when you accept that there's one universal God, then everything it belongs to God. If me, you, and everything is created by that one God, then when you're eating something, Baruch, and it's time to say thank you, or to pay for it, it's Baruch she'achalnu mishalo, which is where we get that expression when we do right before the Birkat Hamazon. We say Baruch she'achalnu mishalo chayinu. Right, that was a quote we borrow from Avraham, who turned to the people after they ate, and they said, we want to, and he would say, Baruch she'achalnu mishalo, go bless the one who we really have eaten from his. And so those that were receptive, this was the opportunity to engage in them, with them in conversation about the one God, which is, in general, Avraham is the first one who recognizes that gastronomical outreach, right? That the way to one's heart is through their stomach, right? But what would happen in case somebody didn't, right? If somebody was not on board with acknowledging this one God, they stubbornly stick to their their own religion, etc. Avram then said, "Okay, in that case, you can pay me." So I just had a nice steak dinner. It was a steak dinner. What does a steak cost? $50. Okay, $50 with some sides, right? That roughly that should be what the cost of the dinner is. And Avram would turn around and say, "No, that's not what a steak costs here in the desert, right? Steak costs in the desert something similar to what a tuna sandwich costs on the other side of security when you're in the airport, right? Where you have no other choice, right? You're stuck there, like $25 for a tuna sandwich, right?
Right.
And in this case, by the time Avram finished ringing up the bill, all of a sudden, a lot of people were a lot more receptive to that first offer, where I didn't have to pay you and you just talked to me about God. And so Avram had a very effective way where he married his innate nature to be hospitable with his desire to share the truth of the one God. So it comes the moment. Well, comes the one moment, and Avram is in a tremendous amount of pain. It's the third day from the Brit Milah. Now, just as a side note, it happens to be that I can attest to the truth of this thing, this age-old idea that the shared in the Midrash, that this was the third day from Abraham's brit, which is the most painful of the days. I can actually attest to it. How do I know? Not from not from myself.
Okay.
but
Is it the
but
story I want
but
to hear?
yes, right. No, but when we were doing the summer camp in Russia, so obviously the Chabad summer camps is an opportunity to to these to engage and give raise awareness of Yiddishkeit, and passion and excitement about it, etc., etc. Now, in an American camp, it's kosher and Shabbos and the holidays and prayer and all these good things. In Russia, where Jewish infrastructure has broken down tremendously, it's also about a bris. And we talked to the campers, and we talked to their parents, and it's a remarkable thing that most of the kids that are in Russia that now have a bris, it's because of the summer camps and the fact that
Wow.
they were told about the value, the power of a bris. And there are two moels that travel the all the campsites from. We actually didn't do it in Russia proper. We were in Belarus, in the outskirts of Minsk, really out in the boondocks. But all
How
over
were they
Ukraine
paid?
and Russia, what?
How were the Moyles paid?
They're paid by the Chabad centers that organize the summer camps, and they themselves, in a sense, are subsidized by kind of international foundations,
That's
so
the
that they.
wrong answer.
What? I see where you're going with this. Less.
They worked for tips. No.
That's right.
If you two guys want to do this, I'm happy to leave.
There's only
yes,
two of us.
I was going
There's
to
only
say
two of
that.
us on here, so I figured I could get away with it.
Yeah. But anyways, so 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 these two miles go around all of Russia, Belarus, and whatever. Because it takes a specialized moel, because at this point, when it's not a baby anymore, it's actually a full blown medical procedure without going into the gory details. The bottom line is that afterwards the kids are convalescing, and it was a fascinating thing that we saw the truth of this, that you can't really tell as a baby, because a baby's a baby and doesn't really know how to express varied degrees as much. But the third day of the convalescence the kids were usually the day after, they're actually doing pretty okay. And it would, like, something would set in on day three, and it would be the roughest day. So it was a very fascinating thing to see the truth of this statement that we had all heard and we all know, and here was actually playing out in front of our eyes. Either way, the point being that Avram is in tremendous pain, and God is so aware of his pain that he does two things. Number one, he makes life easier on Avram. And it says that, as it says, because the parsha opens up and Avram is sitting there at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day, which seems to be a lot of superfluous information. Why do I care exactly Avram's position vis-a-vis his homestead? Right? When it says Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe limor, right? Does it says Vayidaber Hashem said to Moses, saying, right? The myriads of times that it says it throughout the Torah. Does it say, and God was speaking to Moshe while he was in the pumpkin patch at 3:30 p.m.? It doesn't make a difference where exactly he was and what time of the day it was. Why is the Torah going out of what it said? Vayera Hashem to Avram, and God appeared to Avram. The who Yoshev Petach Oel, and he's sitting at the entrance of his tent, Kichom Hayom, at the hottest part of the day. So the clarification is that it wasn't just that it was the hottest part of the day, but it was a particularly hot day. God made it that day particularly hot, so there would be no travelers, there would be no wayfarers, which means that Avram would not have to burden himself with hospitality that day. So Avram could focus on just convalescing. What was Abraham's response to this? He so desperately wanted to do hospitality that he literally sat outside the front of his tent in that incredible heat, so that if there is even one wayfarer, he shouldn't miss that opportunity. He's so desperate to do it. And so, which is why God then said, you know what, Avram, if you're so desperate for wayfarers, let me send you a couple, or a triple. Right? And it sends 3 wayfarers. So Avram sitting there. Now, the truth is, another aspect of this statement, it says that God appears to Avraham, right? And then it goes on to the story of the wayfarers. Wait a minute, what? God appeared to Avraham to tell him what? What was the purpose of his appearance? Usually it says, many times it says, God appeared to Avram and he said such and such and such and such an instruction or guidance or whatever it is, as is always the case. When God reveals himself to an individual, we are immediately told of the purpose of that visit. Yet there's no dialogue here. There is no apparent discussion as to why God showed up. What's the answer to this? Because the purpose of this visit was simply a visit. Here we learn of the concept of Bikur Cholim, of visiting.
Isn't that nice?
Yes, this is straight up in Rashi. This is not even some obscure commentary. Rashi says, quoting from the Talmud, that from here we learn the concept of that God came to visit Abraham in his convalescence. And so it wasn't even so much he didn't have any specific instruction or specific purpose, simply there to visit Abraham. So imagine, imagine you're sitting there and convalescing. God himself comes to pay a call. Which, again, if you are as a person as devout as Abraham, is going to be the high point of your life. That you have this kind of relationship with the King of Kings, with the Holy One, blessed be He, that He personally comes to pay you a convalescence call, and then come 3 schnooks walking down that could just as well be idol worshippers, which is why Avram asked them to wash their feet, right? And Avram does what to God?
He focuses
puts
on
God on hold.
Right. He focuses on the 3.
He says, and it's actually written into the text, Vayomar, and he says, Adonai. Now, many people don't think that means my masters, as he's talking plural to the 3. But actually, if you go look, it doesn't really fit the language, the context of the conversation, because he then speaks to them individually. He says, Adonai, imna matzati chen be'einecha, not be'einechem.
Right.
So he's talking to one entity, and he's referring to it as Adonai. So who's he really talking to here?
Hashem.
He's talking to God, and he's saying, imna matzati chen be'einecha. If I found favor in your eyes, I'm not tavar me'al avdecha. Don't leave. In other words, he's saying, God, let me put you on hold for a moment. Right? He's putting God on hold. Whenever I think about that, it reminds me of one of the better jokes I've ever heard about the story anecdotes. Frank Sinatra shares this. Says it came from him himself. Now, whether it actually happened or was just a nice anecdote and made up, but it's a cute story. So Frank Sinatra says he was in somewhere in the country for a gig, and he's there a little early, so he decides to go into a typical diner, get himself a cup of coffee before he has to make his way to the venue. So he's sitting there at the counter, sipping his coffee, minding his own business, when this young, teenager, young man comes over and he says, "Excuse me, I don't. Are you Mr. Sinatra?" He says, "Yeah, yeah, yes, I am." He says, "Oh, Mr. Sinatra, I'm your biggest fan." He says, I'm humbled to meet you." It says, and he graciously accepts the effusive praise from this young man. And then the young man turns to him and says, "Mr. Sinatra," says, "can I ask you a favor? It would mean so, so much to me. It would really mean so much to me. I'm here with my girl, and I'm trying to impress her. On your way out with coffee, when you pass by our table, do you mind just saying, 'Hey, Billy,' just, it would be a favor. It would mean so much to me." Okay. So, boy goes back. Frank Sinatra is finishing his coffee, and he's like, well, for young love, why not? For young love. So he starts to finish his coffee. He's walking out of the diner. He sees, sure enough, in the booth, there's the young man. There's this girl sitting across from him. And he looks over and says, "Hey, Billy." To which the young man says, "Frank, could you please stop interrupting? Can't you see I'm in the middle of a conversation?" So here, God Himself takes the time to come visit you, and Aaron's like, "One second, God, got to put you on hold. We got something more important to do." Right? It's insulting and blasphemous, and it's like, Abraham, what are you doing? So, what's the answer?
It's
There's
his
not
mission.
Avram understands. Go ahead, Paula.
It's his mission, and it's what God wants him to be doing in the first place.
Exactly right. He's saying, God, as much as for my own personal spirituality and pleasure, spiritual pleasure, being in your presence, there is nothing more important than that. But there is something greater that my entire life has been devoted to beyond my own personal spiritual uh, desires. And that is to fulfill your mission that you've given me. And that's those three people walking right over there. And that, I think, is a very important thing. And this is, and again, where he stands above Noah and where he models for us. Noah had to be told, "Tzei min hateva." We gave a spiritual explanation of what the teva was to Noah, right? What the teva is in our own lives. And when you're facing turbulence and overwhelming waters, then you have the teva of Torah and Tefillah. You have the words, right? Teva means words, the words of prayer, the words of where you can escape to and engage in spiritual bliss and transcend, like the teva does, the troubles and issues of this world. And when you get into that and you're experiencing that kind of bliss, et cetera, it's easy to get lost in that. To say, why would I ever want to leave this? And so Noah needs to be nudged out the door, right? Say min hateva. You've got to leave the Beit Medrash and the Kollel and go out into the world. Go back out into the world. Avram doesn't need that nudging. Avram has it built into the very core of who he is. He is now Av Hamon Goyim, which means that when he sees it automatically, even when he's not just engaged in the bliss of Torah and prayer. But when he's there one-on-one with God himself, Abraham walks away from that moment in order to fulfill the mission of God.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
It almost sounds as though in this instance, Abraham is trumping Moshe in the humility game.
Okay. Clarify.
When Moshe was spoken to by God, he would never think to do something like this. And Moses was a humble man. But look what Abraham does in betooling his yesh. You know, it's not about me. It's about my mission. It's about the people. It's amazing.
So I would tell you that that Moshe, the indication. Well, first of all, just a quote from the Torah: "The Ish Moshe anav me'od mikol adam asher pnei adama." God
Fair
makes a
enough.
declaration about Moshe's humility, but I would say that he does have moments where he, like Abraham, and like Abraham, puts their own relationship with God aside for the sake of the people. And we see that when God turns to Moshe and says, I'm going to hit the reset button on the people, and I'm going to create a whole new nation from you.
Right. Good.
And what does Moshe say?
You
Moshe
take
says
me.
it's this people or bust.
Right. Forget it. Right.
If it's not going to be this people that had caused Moshe, by the way, no end of tsaris,
Right.
right? And he's now being offered that it all starts again from him. What that would mean, by the way, is that the people of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov would cease to be, and forever thereafter it would be, we would start the Amidah, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Velokei Avoteinu Avinu,
Right.
Elokeinu Velokei Avinu, Elokei Moshe, that's it, and carry on. There would be no Elokei Abraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov, it would just be Elokei Moshe. And Moshe puts all that aside, all that spiritual grandeur and all that, and he says it's either this people or nobody.
Mm. Good. Good.
Right? And so Moshe does this show the same sense of humility, I think, and this is a very important point because, and we see this later, right? Moshe gets in God's face on behalf of the people, and Abraham in this week's parsha gets in God's face on behalf of the people, which teach us something important. Because, and where I was going with this, right? Let's go to the story. Let's fast forward to the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, right? First of all, we see an incredible sense of courtesy from God. Again, he asks Avram to have the Brit Milah, which causes a tremendous amount of pain, and God comes and visits Avram. There's something else that happens here. God has determined that Sodom and Gomorrah needs to be wiped out. Now he is God. He created Sodom and Gomorrah. He made the determination. The determination is correct and perfect because everything that God does, all his determinations are correct and perfect. So go ahead and do it. But he does one thing before he does that. Even after he already sent those to pull out the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, pull out Lot from Sodom and Gomorrah, there's another thing he does before he goes and wipes out the city. Avraham. God says, am I going to keep this from Avraham, this that I'm about to do? He feels it necessary to inform Avraham about his plan and to allow Avraham to do what he does, to respond. And this is what Avraham does, and he starts to negotiate. In other words, God says, I've made my decision. But I'm going to pay Avraham the courtesy of informing him. Why? And God says it in the text. God says, because I made him responsible for this world. If I made him responsible for this world, it's only proper courtesy that before I go ahead and do something to the people of this world that I made Avraham responsible over, I inform him about my plans and I allow him to respond. And in this case, Avram steps up to the plate, and not only does he respond and say, God, whatever you say is fitting, go ahead and do. Avram says, how dare you? Right? Chalil mi'asot davar kazeh. And he says, God, I'm not letting you off the hook. Explain this one to me. Let's go through this. Are there not 50 great men, 50 righteous men? Right? Not 50. Okay, how about 45? Right? Here we have learned the age-old Jewish tradition of bargaining, right? 50, not 50. 45, not 45. 40, not 40. 30, not 30. 20, 20. 10. Are these random numbers? It's fascinating. This is very important. These are not random numbers. These are not random numbers. These are very exact numbers. Why? Because what is Abraham saying here? Why is he saying it Chalila Lecha, that God, you should write off these people? He says, because maybe even if right now they're evil, maybe there's a chance sometime now or in the future, maybe a generation or two, or even 10 from now, they will be able to be turned around. If there's even a kernel of goodness, even if a nation of tens of thousands, but if there's a light that could end up being a light onto this nation, then maybe it could be turned around. And what's Abraham searching for? There's a number that indicates a quorum in Yiddishkeit. What's that number?
10. A million, 10.
Why? Why 10? Because 10 are the arc characteristics, the arc character types. From Chachma, Bina, Dad, Chesed, Gvur, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod. So there are 10 sfirot. There are 10, dominant elements of a personality. To have 10 is to have the entire spectrum. In the room, you have all 10 represented. Now, it could be that you have 10 that are all one type of character types, but at least there's the potential that in the room you have every character type represented. It doesn't mean, by the way, that people are monolithic, right? People are not monolithic, right? People are this dominant character type with this one with this sprinkled in, right? Chesed with a little bit of netzach, right?
Right.
Chesed. What does a chesed and netzach personality type? It's the type of person who does kindness, but is absolutely in your face about it, right? Within kindness, right? This is the kind of person that just like, here, take it. I don't want it. I'm fine. No, take it. Doesn't let up with their kindness, right? And then there's somebody that could be chesed but hod, which means they're very good about giving you your space. Very good about giving everybody. In other words, there are all various types of personality traits, but everybody has one particularly dominant and somewhere on the spectrum. And a quorum is that you have. So what's Avram saying? Avram's saying that perhaps there are influencers, righteous influencers. And we would need at least 10 so that any type of personality can be touched.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's 5 cities that make up this region. Maybe there is at least 10 righteous people within each one of these cities. That maybe right now there's corruption and evil, but maybe they can be turned around. God says there isn't. So what's the next number Avram goes to? 45. He says 9 in each one of these cities, and God, you'll be number 10. You'll complete the minyan. So God smiles and says, no, there isn't 45. So then Avram says, okay, so maybe at least we can say 4 cities. Maybe there are 40. There aren't 40. 30. 3 cities, not 30. 22 cities. No. 10, 1 city. And when God says there's not even 10, that's when Avram realizes he's exhausted his options, as it were. And that's when he says, okay, But the point being that Abraham is not willing to let it go if there's even the slightest possibility that this thing could be turned around. And even then, even when it is apparent that it cannot be turned around, Avram doesn't turn his back on the city. What does he do? He forces himself to watch them burn. Because he feels that God made him in charge of the nations, and this failure is his failure. And he has to be there to watch it. He can't turn his back on it.
But Hashem instructs Lot and his family not to look back.
Not to look. Why? Because you know how it is. We've all, driving, and then we see a cop, somebody's pulled over and a cop with the flashing lights, and we do the rubbernecking thing. And there's always that instance, that natural instance of superiority. Look at that person. That person got pulled over by the cop, and I'm going to kind of drive merrily on my way, right? And the thing is, it's a false sense of superiority because we all know that, that this could have just as easily been us. We're not the perfect whatever it is, but there is that natural sense that when you're seeing somebody else and a fate that has befallen them, it gives you a sense. This is called a little bit of Schadenfreude or the rubbernecking, whatever it is. And God is turning to Lot and saying, "You don't deserve to be able to turn around and watch the disaster of Sodom and feel separate and apart from it, because if it wasn't for Abraham, not necessarily are you of the exact same caliber of the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, but for example, more importantly, you were there in it. You were there in it. If Abraham is feeling a sense of responsibility and he was on the outside, then you, who became of the people, and you're being saved not because of your own merit here, you don't have the right to turn around and watch them.
Let me just suggest an alternate. That's wonderful what you're saying. I just look at it differently. Why couldn't Lot and his family look back? Because they might feel sorry and have mercy on these evil people that God decided need to be wiped off the face of the earth. Don't look back and have that rachmanut, that moment of rachmanut.
I would say, but why? Let's follow that. In other words, what was God's concern for that kind of rachmanut?
That it's very hard not to put this in contemporary terms, so I'm trying not to do that, but it's very hard. This had to be done. God had to do this, and it was done in a terrible way that might make one not only feel sorry, but how could God do this, and the blah blah. None of it. You don't look back, because this is what needs to be done. It needs to be done now. I'm doing it. Don't look back. Just believe that I need to do this. Very simple.
Okay. I think that you're saying that a certain amount of acceptance of God's judgment, kind of the tzedakah did. Okay, I'm saying that, but either way, and there's truth to that. I mean, we do see, for example, that after Abraham puts his case forward, and God walks him through it, Avram fully accepts that this is what he has to do his part, but God forbid is he never feeling that he has a superior understanding or superior sense of mercy than God does. And this is also important because too many of us walk away with in general, thinking that if I was in the driver's seat here, I would do better, right?
Bingo. Bingo.
And it's a matter of great faith to be able to accept that sometimes, although we don't understand it, and we don't know how, God's plan is always perfect, and that's a matter of faith rather than logic, because there's going to be points in time where the God's plan seems very far from perfect in vis-a-vis our own logic. But to be able to, in a sense, um, subservient subserviate your own sense of logic uh, to to God, and say that whatever I think I understand or I know, or whatever I think is merciful and just, only is very limited, and my faith allows me to understand and to believe very strongly that when if this happens, and it is at this point beyond my control to do anything about it, then I accept God's judgment, and that is the tzadok hadin that we say in our times of perhaps our greatest grief. But anyways, that's the point. But the first thing that we learn from here is to be like Abraham, and your own spiritual journey is not about you. It really is not about you. Even your own spiritual journey, being that of a kin of Abraham, is to understand that even sometimes you put yourself aside, even if you are in the midst of an incredibly high spiritual moment, if God Himself has come to you, but then there's an opportunity to forward the mission that God gave you. That you, in a sense, you like Avram, God, you put God on hold and fulfill the purpose, your purpose, your divine purpose on this world. The divine purpose comes before your own spiritual um, um, uh, growth.
And
And
when
that
you
is
do
why
that,
we don't.
you're really experiencing Yad Hashem. It's there.
Yeah, of course.
That's all.
But there's a point that things are not monolithic. Sometimes it's not just a choice of good and evil. Sometimes it's a choice of good and good.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have the opportunity to sit in. It's not always an easy answer. I have a choice. I have an option to sit here in the Beit Medrash and learn a little bit more, or go out and help somebody else, perhaps a schnook, perhaps even a potential pagan. Somebody's not smart enough to know not to travel on a day that's this hot, right? And yet Avram is willing to put all this greatest, the seminal moment of his spiritual life, to put it aside for the sake of actually potentially achieving. He doesn't even know if these people will come in, and even if they come in, whether they'll be willing to engage in a conversation about God, etc. And yet, even the potential to do so moves him enough to ask God to hang in there a minute, and while he goes and he spends time, and to get into God's face when he knows that the people he's advocating for are horrible, terrible human beings, and the question is whether there's any potential to turn them around. This is a man committed to the mission, even more than he is committed to his own spirituality. All right,
Okay.
everybody?
I hear you.
Thank you.
I just want to say one thing about Abraham, was that he was, of course, an incredible, unusual man, and that for many of us, I'll speak for myself, but many of us, we do have a hard enough time just taking care of our own spirituality, and may not. I don't want to say we don't have the capacity to look out for others, but that we do have a hard enough time, especially with the Yetzer Hara sitting on our shoulder. Um, so that's just a point I wanted to make.
I think it's a very fair point. What's the answer to your question? The answer to your question is that we Avram is unique not only in the fact that he has the power to do so, but also that he can do so, and it not in a sense where he can walk away from God and it not affect, in a sense, his ability to influence and help others. The bottom line is sometimes, right? You know, kind of what they say, like on the plane. They say put your own
Own mask on first.
your own ear
Yeah.
mask or whatever they call
Right.
it on first. Why? Why not? I love my child more than I love myself. But if you don't get yours on first, you may not have the capacity to get theirs on
Right. Right.
because you may run out of breath, right? So there are times where, for the sake of my mission, I need to make sure that I am topped up in my spirituality. You can't get out there and say, you know what, I'm not going to daven or learn at all because I'm going to spend my whole day out on the streets helping people. How are you going to purvey spirituality if you yourself have not taken the time to cultivate your spirituality? How are you going to teach Torah if you haven't taken the time to learn Torah, etc.? So it's a very careful balance you have to strike. And you have to remember that part of the mission is there's an expression kshot atzmacha in order to kshot acherim, which means make yourself truthful or bring truth to yourself so that you can bring truth to others. Right? Establish yourself so you can help establish others. Bottom line is that you can't. If say a doctor who's not taking care of themselves, who doesn't get a good night's sleep, is a bad doctor. Right? And the same thing in a spiritual sense as well. So we have to strike that balance by all means. But the primary goal is not my own self-growth. Even my own self-growth is committed for the sake of fulfilling my purpose in the wider scope of things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, maybe in terms of being one cog in the greater wheel, it makes a lot of sense.
I think, no, but I think more importantly, what I'm just trying to say is that the way you weigh what is going to be my concerns today, what's the hierarchy of what is important in this moment, is that I am here to serve a purpose. Part of that is, one of the people that have to be affected by you spiritually, so that they can be a really great spiritual individual, is yourself.
Yeah.
That's your first. The first person that you need to influence is yourself, right? Definitely. The one who's most responsible for you is you. But also in your ability to influence others as well, so that you're not just kind of existing in your ivory tower. You do still need to spend time working on yourself in order for others. So it's all. But you can't be exclusive about that kind of thing. And you can't say, here's a moment where I really could have an impact on somebody and I have the ability, I have this, but you know what, I'm in the mood of learning another page of Talmud and another getting lost in the bliss of Torah, et cetera, et cetera. No, there has to be a sense of responsibility for those on the outside of your ivory tower. And that's
especially your own family, for example.
Absolutely. Correct.
It says in the Shema.
Right. Well, we know we were watching the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, right? He first prays for atonement for himself, then for himself and his family, then the Kohanim, and then the entirety of the Jewish people. They understand that the people that God put closest to you with divine providence are the people that you're most responsible to affect. First yourself, then others, then your family members. Then, in other words, as your sphere of influence expands, those are the people that you are most responsible to have an effect on.
I'll talk to you about this on Shabbos morning. It's a little complicated.
Right.
Okay. Thank you very, very much. Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Paula. And Rabbi, you have my permission to delete from the recording my particular joke.
I'm doing a lot of editing lately on these.
I'll bet.
All right, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Shabbat Shalom.